I'm so excited about beginning the family ministry this spring, and it's one of my favorite series of all time that we do every year. And we're talking about how families aren't picture perfect, and that's the title, Picture Perfect. And every family has a struggle, and no family wants to admit it. And it's kind of like, you drive up to church like the Mansons and get out like Gandhi and Mother Teresa. And we all struggle. And so we're going to talk an overview today of really from singlehood. Many of you, and you may want to talk about this, there are a lot of people who are single who really feel called to be single. It's like Paul said, hey, if you're not married, don't seek a wife, don't seek a husband, because you can give yourself more to the service of God and be more conscientious about Him than you are a mate. But there are many of you who are single and, you'd really like to be married to the right person. And you've tried everything. You've tried every, platform there is to look for someone online. But it's just a season where you're alone. And so we're going to talk about that today, but we're going to look at it as an overview. And it comes out of Genesis 24. That's such a long passage. I'm going to read a little bit of it, but I want you to go back and look at the whole thing so you can get the whole story. And it's about Abraham and Isaac, who is his son. And his son is 40, and he's single. Abraham knows that his son is going to be like the legacy is going to come from him in the promise of the covenant. And he's single, and like a lot of parents, they get real concerned about their kids. And so he begins to pray about it. It says, Abraham was old, and the Lord had blessed him in every way. And he said to his senior servant, I want you to go and find, I want you to put your hand on my thigh and pray. And then I want you to swear to the Lord, the God of heaven and earth, that you will go and get a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites, that you won't do that, but among those of where I came from. But you'll go to that country with my relatives and get a wife for my son. It's hard to read this sometimes. The servant asked, what if she won't come back with me? And he says, well, then it's okay. Then you won't have to worry about it. But make sure that you not take my son back there, because God's got a promise for him in the promised land. And so he goes out to find a wife, and he's praying, and that's going to be a thread through all of this. Man, prayer is so important. And really, it's one of those things that I think we could spend more time, even in house church, certainly about what God is doing in our lives, to be praying that God would do some things that we can't do, and be specific with that. Before he had finished praying, Rebekah came out with a jar on her shoulder, and she was the daughter of Bethuel, son of Milcah, who was the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor. And the woman was very beautiful, and she was a virgin. No man had ever slept with her. She went down to the spring and filled the water jar up, and the servant hurried to meet her and said, please give me some water from the jar. Now, he had prayed that she would say, without him asking, let me also water your camels, 10 camels. Probably 2 gallons in the bucket, 100 gallons, 50 trips back and forth. And she did say that. She goes, hey, let me give you a drink and draw water for your camels. And she quickly emptied her jar. It's like she understood about serving and helping. And that's for men and women. That's not just for women. And she came back and drew more water. And then he said, well, where do you live? I want to meet your family. And he goes back and he tells them how he has prayed that God would be merciful to his master, his friend, and bring back a wife. And so it happens in the very end of the chapter, verse 62, that Isaac had come from Beer Lahai Roi. And when you read these words, if you don't understand, that means the one who sees. And it was really Hagar who was there with Ishmael, where God spoke to her and said, hey, I see you. I'm going to take care of you. And that's where he is. And it means that God sees you. And that means that God sees you wherever you are. And as you're praying, he understands because he sees you. And he was living in the Negev, and he went out into the field one evening to pray. And Isaac was a man who prayed and who meditated, who had a covenant relationship with God. And he looked up and saw the camels coming. And Rebekah also looked up, and she saw Isaac. And she got down from her camel and asked the servant, who is that man in the field coming to meet us? He is my master, the servant answered. And she took her veil and covered herself. Then the servant told Isaac all he had done, and Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah, and he married Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. And he was an only child, and he had a stepbrother, but he had moved off. And so it's a beautiful story about how God can bring people together. And one of the things I want to say to parents is, this is an opportunity, even if your children are 1 or 2, they just started walking, for you to pray for them. God, bring the right people into their life. God, begin to lay the foundation in the way we raise our child so that they will be able to know how to treat a woman or know how to respond to a man. And it's really on you. Alicia and I did that with our kids, and we're still doing that with our grandkids, where prayer is something you focus on. I have a friend who that's kind of his story. He knew his parents were praying for him, and it kind of gave him a sense of awareness that I need to be serious about that. If you're a young man and you're beginning to look for someone to date, and maybe God's called you to be single, this is a time for you to pray and be specific about what God would have you do as you go to work, as you go to work out, as you're going about your daily life. You begin saying, God, you show me these qualities. God, show me the person that you would have me meet. And you may want to share in your house church, or if you're watching this in a group at another time, how you met your spouse, and how that was an answer to prayer, or how that was something that scared you. It came out of nowhere, and kind of what pulled you together. Ladies and gentlemen, but this is Rebekah. We get to see it in her. We don't often get to see everything about the men, although you see it in Joseph and some others, but this is Rebekah. Ladies, keep your standards high and your spiritual growth consistent, because it's really important that you have standards when it comes to who you want to date, who you want to marry. And you may want to talk about how hard that is, because every single I talk to says, about after the second date, or maybe on the first date, there are expectations that are like, hey, if we're not going to be together, I'm not going to date you. And I know it's easy for me to say, but maybe that's not the right person, because Rebekah had standards with regard to intimacy. She had standards with regard to her character. She was willing to be selfless. And I'll tell you, even if you're not married, but you're in a relationship with someone, a friendship with someone, you're going to have to learn how to be selfless. You're going to have to learn how to give away things you would like so that the person you're in a relationship can get what they need. She was committed. This is another thing, man. She was committed all the way. The guy came the next morning, said, "We're leaving. We're going to a country you've never been to. You're going to marry a man you've never met." And she honestly felt so strongly about the leadership of God in her life that she went. And we don't see anywhere in here where she said, "I got a problem with this." And couples, let me give you a word here before we end this. Friendship, building your friendship, getting back to those things. Talk about the things you used to do when you were dating. Talk about the spontaneous. Talk about the craziest thing you ever did dating, and you'll be reminded of all the exciting things you did when you were building your friendship, and you'll get back there.